Trust is not a feeling. Most people treat it like something you either have or don't have, something that arrives or disappears without warning, something you give because someone seems trustworthy or withhold because something feels off. But that understanding of trust, as familiar as it is, misses almost everything important about how trust actually works. Trust is a system, a complex, dynamic, largely unconscious system that your brain runs continuously in every relationship you have. And like any system, it has inputs, outputs, failure modes, and conditions under which it functions well or breaks down. Understanding those mechanics, really understanding them, not just knowing the word, changes everything about how you build relationships, how you repair them when they go wrong, and how you understand your own patterns of trusting and not trusting that you may never have fully examined. Subscribe before we go any further. Let's decode it. Part 1. What trust actually is. The most useful definition of trust in psychology comes not from relationship research but from risk theory. Trust is the willingness to be vulnerable to another person's actions, based on the expectation that they will behave in a way that is important to you, without being able to monitor or control them. Read that again. Trust requires vulnerability. It requires expectation. And it requires the absence of control. The moment you can fully monitor and control what someone does, trust becomes irrelevant. You don't need to trust someone you can watch and override. Trust only matters and only exists in the space where you cannot see and cannot control. It is fundamentally about accepting risk. This is why trust is so difficult. It asks you to accept risk, to be genuinely vulnerable. In a domain where past experience has often taught you that vulnerability leads to harm. And the more significant your past experiences of betrayal or abandonment or unreliability, the higher the felt cost of that risk, and the harder the system works to protect you from it. Understanding trust as risk acceptance rather than feeling changes how you think about trust problems. When someone has difficulty trusting when they are guarded, when they test, when they hold back, they are not being irrational. They are being rational about risk, based on a data set of past experience that their conscious mind may not even fully remember, but their nervous system absolutely does. Hit the like button right now if this is already reframing something about how you understand trust, either in yourself or in someone you are close to. Part 2. The 3 components that build trust. Research on interpersonal trust consistently identifies 3 components that together determine whether trust develops, is maintained, or collapses. They are competence, benevolence, and integrity. Competence is the belief that the other person has the ability to do what they say they will do. You can trust someone's intentions completely and still not trust them to follow through if you have evidence that they consistently fail to execute. Their good intentions don't create reliable trust. Competence-based trust is built through repeated evidence of follow-through. They said they would, and they did. Over time, a track record of reliability in small things builds a foundation for trust in larger things. Benevolence is the belief that the other person genuinely has your interests at heart, that they care about your well-being, not just instrumentally, but genuinely. This is harder to build than competence-based trust because it is harder to demonstrate. Benevolence tends to become visible most clearly at moments of cost, when someone chooses your interest over their own convenience, when they tell you something difficult because you need to hear it rather than something comfortable, because it's easier to say, when they show up not because there is something to gain from showing up, but simply because you needed them to. Integrity is the belief that the other person operates according to a consistent set of principles, that they are who they appear to be, that their public and private selves align, that their behavior is predictable not because you have scripted it, but because it flows from something real and stable inside them. Integrity-based trust is built through the observation of consistency over time, not just between their words and their actions, but between who they are with you and who they are with everyone else. When all three are present, when you believe someone is capable, that they genuinely care about you, and that they are who they appear to be, trust develops naturally and durably. When any one of the three is missing or damaged, trust becomes partial, conditional, or fragile. Most trust problems in relationships are not failures of the whole system. They are failures of one component that then distort the others. Part 3. How trust is damaged. Trust is not damaged in proportion to the objective severity of the betrayal. It is damaged in proportion to how much the betrayal violates the specific component of trust that was most important to the person betrayed. For someone whose trust is primarily built on integrity, on the belief that you are who you appear to be, a lie of any size can be catastrophic. Not because of the content of the lie, but because it fractures the entire framework of who they believed you to be. If you are not who you appeared, then which version of you is real? All of it becomes uncertain. For someone whose trust is primarily built on benevolence, on the belief that you genuinely care about their well-being, discovering that you prioritized your own comfort over their genuine need is deeply damaging, even if the action itself seems small. It doesn't matter that it was a minor thing. What matters is what it revealed about what happens when your interests and theirs conflict. For someone whose trust is primarily built on competence, on reliable follow, through repeated small failures of execution, even when accompanied by genuine remorse and good intentions, erode the foundation in a specific way. They create a split between emotional trust and behavioral trust, and that split produces a particular exhaustion, loving someone while not being able to depend on them. Understanding which component of trust has been damaged matters because it determines what repair actually requires. Apologizing for a lie does not rebuild integrity-based trust. It only begins to rebuild it if it is followed by a sustained period of consistency that demonstrates the lie was an aberration rather than a revelation. Promising to try harder does not rebuild competence-based trust, only a track record of follow-through does. Understanding this distinction is the difference between gestures that feel like repair and repair that actually functions. Subscribe right now if this is giving you a framework for something you have experienced but never quite had the language to describe. Part 4. Attachment patterns. And trust, your current patterns of trust, how easily you extend it, how you respond when it is threatened, how you repair it when it breaks, are not random. They are the output of a system that was largely calibrated in your earliest significant relationships. Attachment research consistently shows that the security or insecurity of early attachment experiences shapes adult trust patterns in predictable ways. People who grew up with reliable, responsive caregivers tend to have what researchers call secure attachment. They approach relationships with a baseline expectation that others can be trusted, that closeness is safe, that vulnerability is unlikely to be punished. They trust relatively readily, they communicate needs directly, and when trust is damaged, they tend to be able to repair it without the repair itself becoming another source of damage. People who grew up with unpredictable or inconsistent care tend to develop anxious attachment, a heightened sensitivity to signals of potential betrayal or abandonment, a tendency to need more reassurance than most partners can comfortably provide, and an automatic escalation of the threat response when trust feels uncertain. Their distrust is not irrational, it is a rational response to a formative environment where the signals of danger were real and needed to be monitored carefully. The problem is that the monitoring system calibrated in that environment continues running in environments where the danger is much lower. People who grew up in environments where emotional needs were consistently unmet or dismissed tend to develop avoidant attachment, a learned self-sufficiency that keeps intimacy at a managed distance. They do not distrust so much as they have learned not to need, which is a form of preemptive protection. The cost is closeness. The benefit is safety from a specific kind of disappointment. None of these patterns are destiny, but they are the default, and they run below conscious awareness, which means they tend to operate most powerfully precisely in the moments when you most need to respond consciously, moments of threat, closeness, vulnerability, conflict. Part 5. What builds trust over time? Trust is not built in grand gestures. It is built in small, consistent moments that accumulate over time into something the nervous system eventually categorizes as reliable. Research on what makes trust durable, as opposed to quickly built and quickly destroyed consistently, points to the same elements. Predictability. Not in the sense of being boring or scripted, but in the sense of being consistent. The person you trust is someone whose behavior you can anticipate, not because you control them, but because you know who they are. They react to difficulty in recognizable ways. They show up in consistent patterns. Their character is stable enough that you can model it, and your model tends to be accurate. Repair. Every relationship experiences ruptures, moments of misattunement, misunderstanding, failure, hurt. What distinguishes relationships that build trust from relationships that erode it is not the absence of rupture, but the presence of repair. When repair happens consistently, when breaches are acknowledged, when harm is taken seriously, when the relationship is treated as worth the difficulty of repair, trust actually deepens through the rupture-repair cycle rather than simply being depleted by it. Mutual vulnerability. Trust is not built by one person being consistently vulnerable while the other remains consistently protected. Genuine reciprocal vulnerability, where both people have something real at stake, where both people have shown the other something they could not safely show. Everyone creates the kind of mutual investment in each other's well-being that makes trust not just a feeling, but a structure. Closing trust is a system. It has components: competence, benevolence, integrity. It has failure modes, specific to which component is damaged and which patterns of attachment govern the person experiencing the damage. It is built not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent moments of reliability, repair, and mutual vulnerability. Understanding trust as a system rather than a feeling does not make it less important or less real. It makes it more actionable. It gives you a way to understand what went wrong when trust fails, not just that it failed, but which part failed and what that specific failure requires. It gives you a way to understand your own patterns, why you trust easily or not at all, why certain things feel like unforgivable betrayals and others do not touch you, why some repair feels real and other repair leaves you more uncertain than before. Most importantly, it gives you something that most people never have in their relationships: a map. Not a guarantee, not a formula, a map. And in the territory of human connection, complex, uncertain, and worth navigating with more skill than most of us were given, a map is more valuable than you might think. Hit that like button if this gave you something genuinely useful. Drop in the comments which of the 3 components of trust do you think is most important to you personally: competence, benevolence, or integrity? Drop it below. I read every single one. And subscribe before you go. Until then, trust wisely.